corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, there have been many great moments in the culinary and entrepreneurial career of Chef John Besh. Then there was this week when everything suddenly turned bad. We'll look back at what we learned, including the star power of chefs, the call for more human resources on the job, and why we still need newspapers. We'll also examine an upheaval in the New Orleans Inspector General's office, council politics in the East, and the mayoral race gets nasty. Plus, we will hear from a journalist who developed a very close relationship with Fats Domino. Walking with us are tonight's Informed Sources: Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Jeff Adelson, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate; Chelsea Brasted, reporter, NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune; and Eric Paulson, news anchor, WWL-TV, Channel 4. We go over to Jeff first and touch on mayor politics. The runoff just a few weeks away, and it's getting nasty.
It's been a pretty wild week in the mayoral runoff. The week started with Desiree Charbonnet's camp leveling a number of charges against excuse me, LaToya Cantrell, largely dealing with her use of a city credit card as a member of the city council. A lot of those charges focus on the fact that there are about $9,000 worth of payments that Cantrell made on the credit card and then later repaid, which the Charbonnet camp says that's a tacit admission that these were personal charges. They should never have been billed to the taxpayers in the first place. And, you know, Cantrell, who, you know, about half of those charges were repaid just after she qualified for mayor, even though the charges stretched back several years. They're saying, you know, look, this is her just cleaning up and trying to make it look like she wasn't doing this all along. That then ramped up to a much higher degree yesterday when DA Leon Cannizzaro, who's a major backer of Charbonnet's, forwarded a request to investigate these charges based on what they referred to as an anonymous complaint that pretty much tracks the opposition research that Charbonnet's camp had put out. So they forwarded that to the AG's office and asked him to look into charges against Cantrell, which certainly is an unprecedented escalation in this sort of thing, especially for
this race get complicated.
Oh yeah, well, and it's even more complicated as of this afternoon when Cantrell's camp filed ethics charges against Cannizzaro, say we don't know exactly what those charges contain, but presumably some sort of abuse of power.
Well, they also noted that Desiree Charbonnet's brother, Bunny Charbonnet, holds a contract with the DA's office for civil work. So Charbonnet's camp released this information because it was through a records request, was it?
They got the records through a public records request and then distributed to a number of media outlets.
This is regarding the expenses of LaToya Cantrell as councilperson. So the guidelines then for the use of these public monies by city council, they're a little bit squishy. They're not as firm as with the executive office, the executive branch.
Right. Under Mayor Landrieu, the executive branch has put in really strict guidelines on how to deal with city credit cards. They eliminated most of the credit cards that are out there. You need documentation, you need approvals, things like that. The city council is a separate branch, and they set their own rules, and their rules are a lot looser. Basically, you don't have to document any of your charges. It's really up to the council members themselves to determine what is or isn't a personal charge. And sometimes they get a little guidance from staff. Sometimes, you know, staff members have told us that sometimes they'll go to the council offices and say, you know, this is probably something that isn't a legitimate charge. You should maybe maybe think about repaying that, but there's no real guidelines. So one of the things Charbonnet has pointed out is that there's no documentation, but that's not actually a violation in terms of the policies that were in place.
But you got to wonder, is this the tip of the iceberg? I mean, is it just LaToya who's doing this, or is it other council people doing the same kind of thing?
I think that's a very good question. You know, there seems to be a sense that outside of the individual charges, and we're still going through all the charges in, you know, almost 5 years worth of credit card receipts right now, but outside the individual charges, it seems like the way Cantrell was documenting her purchases wasn't necessarily uncommon. Whether individual charges are a sign that, you know, there was some spending is something that I think we and other outlets are still looking into.
So impact on this mayor's race, as you said, you know, you're just starting to look into this, and also there's probably now going to be some questions about other council members' expenditures too. What kind of impact could this potentially have on the outcome of the mayor's race?
Well, it's complicated. So certainly this week started off very badly for LaToya Cantrell. These are revelations that, regardless of, you know, what ends up turning up, they look very bad for her candidacy. It's possible that the Charbonnet campaign may have overplayed its hand a little bit, though. Involving the DA in this, having him publicize this in particular, which is something his office does not do. They will not discuss pending investigations. Apparently, unless it includes
it casts a lot of doubt on both sides, on both camps.
Yeah, and so the question is whether it evens out in the end, whether you end up, with people thinking that Cantrell comes off as a victim in this, whether Cantrell comes off as having done something improper. The fallout from the ethics complaint is yet another level. And I think what we're going to see, frankly, both sides, but none of the candidates themselves had been particularly eager to attack each other in the primary. I think we've definitely turned a corner on that. I think we're going to see a much fiercer and meaner campaign for the last few weeks.
Okay, all right, Jeff, thanks a lot. Let's go over to Errol now. And of course, another tremendous story over the course of this week was John Besh and what's happened within his restaurant group, as alleged by, 25 women who came forth, and John Besh himself stepping down from the group.
Yeah, well, you know, looking at the story is that one thing that comes to mind is that this sort of thing can happen in any industry. It can happen to lawyers, accountants, bankers, anywhere. But it just shows the celebrity power of chefs that became such a big story, primarily because it was about a chef of a high-profile chef, and so people have done business with a chef. They've been to their places, and of course, in Besh's place, they had a huge payroll too, and he was highly visible. In contemporary times, I think the three celebrity chefs out of New Orleans were Paul Prudhomme first, Emeril Lagasse second, and John Besh third, and probably in that order in terms of popularity. And so it's a little bit more stirring because it's him. But you know, one thought that came to mind is that I was talking to a food critic one time who was critical of Emeril Lagasse and said, you know, Emeril's a chef. A chef belongs in the kitchen. And seeing John Besh and asking about that and saying, you know, this guy was saying chefs belong in kitchens. And I remember that Besh said, you know, Emeril Lagasse liberated me. He said, Emeril Lagasse was the guy who proved that you don't have to be in the kitchen all the time, that you can still be a good cook and you can still go out there and have ideas and start businesses and being an entrepreneur, which is exactly what Besh was. And some of his restaurants, you know, like August is and Luke, a huge success. Domenica just almost redefined the pizza restaurants. I mean, made a pizza restaurant really an upscale, and then of course the restaurant adventure with Shia was nationally recognized. Some weren't quite as successful, but he was certainly an important person on the scene, and someone that with the charisma and the looks that was just very attractive to people into the industry.
And you know, all this controversy with the Besh Restaurant Group came on top of the controversy that was brewing with this fight with Alon Shia and the partners and the other two partners in the group, Octavio and John Besh.
And if you look at some of the comments that Sire was making, they make a little bit more sense now in that context, because he was talking about having an organization where everybody works well together and everybody gets along. Before all this happened, it didn't necessarily make any sense, but now you can kind of connect that maybe this issue was festering at that level too at that time.
And of course, the issue that we're talking about, I don't think we mentioned that, was allegations of a culture of sexual harassment that existed within the Besh group. And one thing that Alon Shaya has been quoted as saying is that he went to his partner saying, we need a human resources department and we don't have it. And that's something that you followed up on, taking a look at other restaurant groups in the city to see if that kind of department did exist, so that people could have a place to go to other than their immediate supervisors, which now the Besh group, we should say, does have a human resources department, but only recently.
Right, yeah, so they hired someone, I believe their professional HR person came on staff October 11th, which is, of course, before Brett Anderson's story ran. And I think it's also important to point out that this is all happening against the backdrop of the Harvey Weinstein allegations coming out, and we actually received a lot of commentary at the Times-Picayune of people saying, oh, like this is just because of the Harvey Weinstein thing. I mean, Brett was working on this for 8 months, so it's just happenstance that it happened right now. One of the things that was most interesting to me in reading Brett's story was seeing, the HR question that even if there were, even if there was a woman who wanted to go to somebody in this organization, there was no one for them to go to. And so I called around a couple of different restaurant groups in the city to find out, is that common? Is that a normal thing for there to be no HR department or staff or someone who's dedicated to that? And it turns out that, by and large, the Besh group was a total anomaly in this. I'm thinking of the people I called, the Dickie Brennan group. They have half the number of employees as the Besh group's 1,200, and they have three people dedicated to HR, and that's about the norm that I found in calling around.
So that's what we're seeing as the norm in this day and age, but really in sort of like less than 20 years ago, that was not necessarily something that you did see in the restaurant industry.
Right, yeah, even within, for example, Donald Link's restaurant group, they only brought on a full-time HR person about a year ago. They had somebody on staff dedicated to it, but it wasn't necessarily their full-time job until 1 year ago. And the Donald Link group is another major one in the city.
But didn't you mention that there are some restaurant groups that have like a third party that with the check writing service or something?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the examples was I called the LeBlanc and Smith group. These are the guys that own Sylvain, Mobar, Barrel Proof, and so their group's a little small. They have about 120 employees. But so now, because of all of this, they're looking into they're outsourcing their HR. And so what you can do for those groups is a lot of payroll companies like ADP or Payflex, they'll contract out their HR, so there's one other phone call that a person can make. So maybe they don't feel comfortable calling their direct supervisor, but they'll call somebody else who can step in and help out.
So we need to address John Besh's response to these charges, to the Times-Picayune. We said Brett Anderson has, started getting some comments early, months and months ago, and started doing the investigation. 25 women came forward making these accusations, these charges of sexual harassment. Besh's response to all of this has been what?
To step down. So he, on Monday, it was announced that he was going to be leaving. A lot of what he said in Brett's article was, commenting that there was one particular relationship that he said was consensual among two consenting adults, and not condoning behavior, but basically saying that this wasn't an issue and they were going to address it, as things came up. But then the story came out Saturday, and by Monday morning we'd heard that Besh had stepped down.
And it certainly did rock the restaurant industry, I should say, and it was just really quite a surprise.
On the other hand, I saw an interview with Susan Spicer on Channel 4,
yeah,
and she said, correct me if I'm wrong, that she said that when she got into the industry, her first 3 mentors were all Frenchmen, okay, and she said they were all great. They were all great to work for her.
Okay, well, then sad to see situation, and we'll see what develops out of that in the future. Eric, another really sad situation that happened this week is the loss of an amazing musical great. That doesn't even that really is not even enough to say about Fats Domino, what he did for New Orleans certainly, but just for music in general.
Arguably, he and David Bartholomew were the fathers of rock and roll with their first song in 1949 called "The Fat Man." Even the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame recognizes that as just such a defining line in the history of rock and roll. And his passing was not unexpected, but still, when I learned the news on Wednesday morning, I mean, it was a shock.
Yeah.
Because I had just talked to his daughter, Donica, 2 days before on another matter, and everything seemed fine. You know, she said, "Tell the family hello." I said, "Tell your dad hello," and that kind of stuff. And then to get the news on Wednesday morning, it was horrible.
And it was quite obvious too that you were really shocked and very saddened.
Well, I had just gotten off the phone with Donica, and I thought I was okay. And then when I actually had to say it, that the emotion just welled up, and it's just like boom.
Because you were more than just a fan of Fats Domino. You were have been a very close personal friend for quite a long time now.
Yeah. Errol had asked me before how I got to know Fats, and I, like many other reporters, had tried for years to get him to do an interview, and he was quite camera shy. And, you know, he'd always say, "Yeah, come around next week," and you come around next week, and he'd say, "No, I can't do it." And so it was his 76th birthday, and in our newsroom they had a bet going on that the news director at the time said, "Well, I wonder if Eric can get it," and the assistant news director said, "I bet he can't." So the challenge was on. So I called his daughter, and I said, "Donica, do you think your dad would do an interview with me on his birthday?" Which was that day. And she said, "I'll go check." And she goes and checks. She comes back, and she says, "Yes, he said he'll do it." And I said, "Well, you know, he said this before. Will you just go back and ask him again?" And so she went and asked him again. She came back and she said, "Yes, he'll do it." And I said, "Well, I'll go after the noon show." And after the noon show, I went over to his house. Actually, you went to his annex. The house is on Murray, and most people don't realize that. The big house where he lived was on Murray. The yellow building on Caffin Avenue was the annex that he had. He used it. He was there, I mean, so much of the time. In fact, we did the interview there. You walk in, there was a little room in the beginning, because it's a rather small place in the beginning. It's like a Camelback. And there's a piano in there and some records and CDs and things like that. Then you go back, there's a kitchen where Fats would make red beans and stuff. And then you walk back into this giant pink room, and it was huge. And there was a second floor where there was like a balcony, and there were theater seats up there, and then the TV screen was a huge TV screen was mounted on the wall on this room with a big dining room table and all pink. And so I sat down, we started talking to Fats. We talked for the longest time, and he was very animated and very comfortable. I didn't realize, I found out then he was a fan of the morning show, and which was extremely flattering. and so as I was leaving, and he played piano for us and did some songs. I mean, it was a wonderful day, and people were coming in and out on his birthday. And as I was leaving, I saw this picture he has, and you've probably seen pictures of Fats Domino. He's got this old Cadillac that was made into a couch, the rear end of a Cadillac. And he had a picture of him standing in front of it. And I told him how wonderful that picture was, and I asked him about it. He told me all about it. And then I left, did the story. A couple days later, I get a package, and he had sent me the picture with a really nice.
Just the beginning of a very, very close, dear friendship. And I can tell that this is all heartfelt, what you're saying. And one thing I wanted to ask you, in your knowing him, I mean, we always hear he was such a nice guy. Like you said, he was shy, and New Orleans was his home. His family meant so much to him. Did he have any real recognition? Did he understand what he brought to the world of music and his legacy? What it would be?
Yes and no. I remember in the interview, the first interview I did, he told me about the Beatles, and he said he did a concert in Liverpool, and the Beatles opened for him. And then when the Beatles came to New Orleans in the 60s, I said, "You went to meet the Beatles?" And he goes, "No, the Beatles wanted to meet me." And so he understood, but you know, he was very humble. I mean, I've heard from so many people. over the past couple of days, and there's stories about Fats Domino, and from delivery men to somebody bringing hardware to the house. If there are hot Fats that bring them in, get him a Barks root beer or a Heineken or something.
That's what I heard.
I mean, he was just the nicest guy. You knock on the door, and he'd come in and go get some red beans.
That's pretty amazing.
But after he had sent me that picture, a couple of days after that, he called me up and asked me if I wanted to go get a drink. So I drove over, and at the time I had a little Jeep Wrangler, and I drove over to his house, and he's got the 2 Rolls Royces outside, and a big Mercedes, and a Lexus, and some other stuff. And I assumed we were just going to go in one of his Rolls Royces. And he goes, well, let's go in your Jeep, Eric. So we go over on St. Claude Avenue, and go to a little bar called Moore's. And we park on the neutral ground, and we're getting out of the car, and people are waving and stuff like that, because it's Fats Domino. We go in, we have a couple of drinks at the bar for 15 minutes or so, and then all of a sudden a Fats Domino song comes on. And everybody at the bar is kind of singing with it. It was a magical moment. And then he asked me to go to a concert, and then it was, a call every couple of weeks or whatever.
What a blessing for you to have him as a personal friend, and just for all of us too, who've lived in this generation, this time when these musical greats have been walking the earth. At the same time that we were.
And to know him at a time when he was still, so vibrant and so happy, and and then to watch it change over the years.
Did he refer to himself as Fats, like when he called you?
Oh yeah.
He was Fats from really young, right?
Well, yeah. After that, he was Antoine Domino Jr., and then after the Fat Man came out, because people started calling him Fats too, but then it became Antoine Fats Domino. Okay.
Well, quite the guy.
Yeah.
Wonderful stories that you have of him. Thanks for sharing, Eric. Let's go over to Jeff real quick right now, and or New Orleans at any rate is in search for a new Inspector General. There's an interim on board right now.
There's an interim on board. There's been a great deal of turmoil in that office in recent weeks. But Inspector General Ed Quatrevo left the office last week. He retired, yep. He did so after, earlier in the week, having fired one of his top deputies. That deputy had already been appointed the interim Inspector General, so he's now back in charge of the office, and that all deals with a report that deputy had written about a different deputy in the office.
A draft report.
A draft report,
that was leaked, et cetera. So you say that he, the one who was fired, is now the interim appointed by the Ethics Review Board. I mean, all of it is a pretty complex situation. Tell us about the Ethics Review Board, and now what do they have to do?
So the Ethics Review Board is the entity that oversees the Inspector General's office and the Independent Police Monitor, now that those are 2 separate offices. They're in the process of searching for a permanent Inspector General. That's a process that's probably going to take a few, at least is expected to take a few more months.
Because they've been looking at this. The call went out earlier this year.
Call went out earlier this year. It's been a rather interesting process. So, early in the year, Quatrevo sort of made a plea saying the Ethics Review Board was trying to find someone else. There's been a lot of back and forth there, but they've been looking to find a replacement. Through that time.
So ultimately, he is retired, and they're still looking for the replacement.
Yep.
Okay, and months ahead, do you think, in that process before the permanent is selected? I mean, are they still taking applications or
I actually have to double check whether they're still taking them. They were taking them up until fairly recently, and the process is expected to go for a little bit longer. And we'll see how that goes.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeff. Over to Arrow real quick now, and District E race and council.
District E is that expansive New Orleans, roughly all of that on the other side of the high rise. It's a very difficult district because it is so widespread, not thickly populated in the area, but but just spread out. There's a lot of poverty in the area, and the big issue has always been, I think people, whoever is the council member from that district is going to always have a problem because their constituents are going to pretty much always be dissatisfied because it's hard to deliver services there. You know, people want more hospitals, they want more stores, and ideally that's wonderful, but it's not an area that's easy to find investors in. So it's become a difficult area. James Gray, who's the incumbent, was forced into a runoff. Usually anytime an incumbent's forced into a runoff, that's not a good sign. Running against him is a woman named Cynthia Nguyen, who's very active in the area, especially in the Vietnamese community. And so it could be an interesting race in that sense. But even in that race, they say it's just hard to deliver. And you know, if people say they want more shopping centers, this is an era when shopping centers are being questioned. I mean, you know, existing shopping centers. I think a real key to this is the Jazzland site, though. You know, if something major could happen to the Jazzland site that could stir development around the area and that could create more businesses, that might be the kind of impetus that it needs. Currently, the administration has said, well, we're going to try to do something. There have been many attempts, but not much has happened. In the old Space Center area, there's not much activity going there. That was once the hope of the future, and not much is. And so it doesn't suffer for lack of space. It just suffers for lack of ideas and people wanting to invest in it. And all the kind of industrial development that people were once hoping for the East really kind of went in the opposite direction into the whole Elmwood area and then beyond that direction.
Okay, well, that's a race to watch. And now it's time for us to look ahead.
Smoothie King is opening its 66th store in the area this weekend. It's going to be in the Pan American Building, and it's one of like a couple of thousand that it's had nationwide. This is a you know, business that's domiciled in Metairie, and it's becoming just a major player corporately. Okay,
Jeff.
Well, next week the city has scheduled a bid opening for the root cause analysis of what went wrong at Sewage and Water Board. This is the, I think, third time they've scheduled this meeting. They haven't been able to award this contract yet, but I think everyone's eager to see who gets it and what that's going to show.
Okay, Chelsea.
So on Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, 4 women led by photojournalist Katie Sikora are going to present a new sort of multimedia project at Preservation Hall with its photographs and not essays, interviews and music on sexism in New Orleans music.
Okay.
So that should be a good show and really great photos.
And again, where? At
Preservation Hall, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday.
Okie doke. Thanks a lot. Eric.
Wednesday at 6:30 on Channel 4, we are doing a special on actually, a lot of my personal things with Fats Domino. A lot of the interviews we never aired. A lot of personal videos I have and personal pictures, and we'll just go over the Fats Domino that most people don't get a chance to see. And it's a Fats Domino. Once you see it, you'll love them.
And when again? Wednesday?
Wednesday at 6:30.
Services? We just really aren't sure.
No,
about
they haven't said anything yet.
Okay. All right, Eric. Thanks a lot. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod & Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.